Welcome to Let's Feed Liam, a new food series where I make my friend's favorite foods work for his weight loss journey. Today we're making this pepperoni pan pizza that has a whopping 90 grams of protein. It only takes 5 ingredients and it's perfect for people who have no experience in the kitchen. I'm gonna put all the ingredients, directions and stuff for the recipe in the description below so you can check it out yourself, but follow along and watch us make it. So we're gonna make everything in this cast iron pan. So the first thing that we're gonna start off by doing is making the dough. This is the mixer that we're gonna be using. You don't have to use a special heavy duty mixer. These are especially helpful if you're gonna make like a big batch of bread dough or a huge batch of cookies or something. You use a mixer like this because it's really powerful. When you're just making a dough, you can use a spatula like this. You can use your bare hands. It's pretty easy. I'm using a mixer just because it makes it faster. And I like speed. But you can use whatever works for you. One of the beauties of this pizza dough that we're making, unlike a lot of other doughs which are super high carb and high calorie, the dough that we're making is incredibly simple. It only requires 2 ingredients: Greek yogurt and self-rising flour. It's gonna make this work really easy. Some people like to add a little bit of salt and maybe some herbs to their dough. You can do that too if you want some extra flavor. But all you need are basically equal parts self-rising flour and Greek yogurt. This Greek yogurt, by the way, 0% from Fage. I want to read you the macros on this. This thing has, for 3/4 of a cup, 90 calories and 18 grams of protein, which, doing the math, is about the same macros that like chicken breast has. It's a crazy high protein to calorie ratio. Using this in our dough is one of the reasons why it's going to have so much more protein and fewer calories than other kinds. So I'm a big fan of it.
What's the difference between self-rising flour and regular flour?
But as far as I know, self-rising flour is just flour that has like a little bit of baking powder, might have a little bit of salt as well. Because I know that if you're gonna use regular flour to make dough and you wanna make it self-rising, you can convert it. You just need to add a little bit of like baking powder and I think a little bit of salt, and that's pretty much it. So it's pretty close to the main thing, but it's a little bit more self-sufficient, as its name suggests, self-rising flour. So it doesn't need the help of baking powder, baking soda, or other ingredients to get the job done. All right, so we're gonna do a cup of each of these things. Get in here with our cup measure, shake it off so it's roughly even. Put that in there. I'm gonna grab my yogurt now. Sometimes you're a little scrappy and that's okay. Liam, what's your favorite pizza place in LA? What have you ordered from the most?
See, my all go-to place is Brazzo Pizza.
Not sponsored.
Not sponsored. Nor is it anything.
Should be sponsored, but not.
Should be, from how much I've been having. But it won't beat New York pizza. For Brazzo Pizza, it's on par.
Yeah, it's Brazzo's pretty solid. It's one of the better pizza chains. Brazzo pizza is also dripping with oil, and I know the macros on it aren't great, so it's good to find some kind of option that's healthier. It's gonna still work with your fitness goals and give you the food that you wanna eat. All right, this is basically a cup. We're gonna dump this in. I'm not super worried about like tight measurements. If you want like an anatomically perfect recipe in a baking context, then yeah, you should level everything, weigh everything, and do it perfectly. But for a dough like this, there's a good amount of leeway. And as long as you eyeball it and understand what the texture should look like, which I'm gonna show you, it's pretty hard to make a mistake. You can be a little bit loosey-goosey with the measurements. So roughly a cup of each. I'm gonna keep my flour here in just case I need a little bit more. I'm gonna turn my crank and bring this up. I'm gonna let the dough hook do its thing. So you can see the dough here is pretty much ready. One of the reasons why I love the KitchenAid mixer in particular is it keeps your hands clean. If I'm gonna use my hands to make a dough, which sometimes is necessary, certain kinds of breads, it's gonna be better for you to hand knead stuff. You don't wanna risk over mixing it. With this, you're in a pretty safe position, and I'm not, getting dough all under my fingernails and stuff, so we're gonna bring this down. You want your dough here sort of be a little bit sticky. The other extreme where it's so sticky that you can't like knead it at all or press it into a flat shape, which is what you're gonna need for pizza dough. So as I see this, it's definitely could use a little bit more flour because it's a bit on the stickier side. So I'm just gonna eyeball some in here, shaking a little over top. That should be enough. Throw it right back on the KitchenAid mixer and let it do its thing.
So you don't have to let this flour like fluff up or anything like that?
I know that when you're making breads and stuff, you really want it to rise a lot. With a pizza dough, we don't need it to rise a lot. We don't need like a really thick crust. So my understanding is typically no, we're not gonna need to do that. All we're gonna do is we're gonna press this in the bottom of the pan, let it bake for a little bit just to get the baking process started. And then halfway through the baking process, we're gonna put our toppings on, slide it back in the oven and call it a day, until it's ready. Something else to know in general with breads, While I'm not a baking expert by any means, what I do know is the longer you let dough like this sit out and rise, the fluffier, taller texture you're gonna get out of your bread. So we've made our dough, we're in good position. Now, really important trick for reducing the number of calories that you use while you're cooking. Oils are super calorically dense. They're the most calorically dense macronutrient. They have 9 calories per gram. By calories per gram, I'm referring to fats, because oils, like avocado oil, olive oil, etc., they're just fats, right? Protein and carbs have 4 calories per gram each. When you're using oil with anything, using a little bit too much or being loosey-goosey with the measurements can add hundreds of calories to your recipe and to your meal, which you want to avoid. So I'm using a spray. A spray is going to make it easier for me to avoid going over, because like even in a single tablespoon of olive oil, it's like over 100 calories, right? Just a spoonful can be way too much. So using the spray keeps the numbers lower, but still gives me the fats that I need on the bottom of this pan for it to work well. I think that was the last of it. I think I'm actually running out. Well, perfect timing. That's just the amount that I needed. I'm gonna put a little bit more in my hands. This is, by the way, another hack for like if your dough, this dough here is not supposed to be perfectly dry. If you just keep adding flour to this, you'll eventually get a dough that's like Play-Doh-like. It's like fun to play with, doesn't get sticky, but it's gonna turn into a really dry and hard crust, which you don't want for pizza. You want it to be softer. You want some of that moistness in there, so you can't just add flour all day, you'll ruin it. However, without that flour, it's sticky. So one of the solutions is if you put a little bit of oil on your hand, look at this. No stick, right? Some people like to flour their hands, that works too, but that's sort of a Band-Aid over a bullet hole solution, because as soon as you like run out of the flour and it sticks to the dough again, your hands are going back to being sticky. Oils are gonna stay on your hand a little more, which is why we'll wash them when we're done. But just for the process of adding in this dough to the pan makes it really easy. All right, so I'm gonna preheat my oven, which I should have done earlier, but that's fine. Set that to 400. We're ready to flatten this bad boy. So I'm gonna put it here and I'm just gonna press and kind of spread as I press. If it breaks at the edges a little bit, that's okay. That's fine. Just get it as flat as you can.
Realistically, how long would this take for you to make?
Yeah, if I preheat the oven, I mean, you saw me just mix 2 ingredients in a bowl with a mixer. So I could probably make the dough in a good 5 minutes, easily, especially if my ingredients are super organized. Done a pretty good job with this dough.
How long are we putting this in the oven for?
So we're gonna let this, I think the term is par bake, which just means we're gonna partially bake it. Yeah, we're gonna put this in for about 10 minutes on 450, and then it's either 400 or 450. I'm gonna double check. Let me make it easier on myself. So correction, I checked. It is 450. With pizzas in general, like if you ever see like a pizza oven, they always cook it at a really, really high temperature, because you wanna kind of like melt the cheese on top and give everything like a good crisp crust, but you want stuff to be sort of soft on the inside. When you do something like a cookie that has more of like a homogeneous texture, like it's consistent throughout, it's not like you have like a gooey middle and a and a harsh crust. Like you don't do that for a cookie. You're gonna do a lower temperature for a longer period of time. That's gonna create a more like even texture throughout. Whereas for the pizza, we're gonna kind of like flash bake it. Put it in short time, you know, really high temperature, it's gonna get us the result we need. Because our dough is also being made from scratch, and just because of the nature of how these 2 ingredients work together, we're gonna bake this dough for 10 minutes at 450, take it out, put our toppings on, our cheese sauce, etc., throw it right back in, and we'll finish the job in 15. So it's pretty easy. I'd say start to finish on this recipe, probably like 35, 40 minutes. But that includes the baking time. And the baking time is time you can spend cleaning up, doing your laundry, doing whatever else it is. So it's not like a true, 40-minute commitment when you have a recipe like that. Always got to consider how much free time you have to just do whatever you want. Just cleaned up a little bit to get the kitchen clear. I'm a big believer in cleaning as you go. It makes the finished product of your food easier to get to, because you're not like, oh man, I need to work through a mountain of dishes before I can enjoy my food. And then while you're cleaning, it gets cold. Like that sucks. Don't do that. Clean as you go, which we did. So now we're ready to put this in the oven. Got our dough in. We're gonna let this go for 10 minutes. Pull it out and we'll finish the job. We've got our dough about halfway baked, which means it's time to grab it and put our toppings on. Looking good. You know that the par bake's gone well when you can sort of see some browning around the edges here, which means that the bottom of it is starting to get nice and crispy. I made this recipe a bunch before, and when you make this recipe without par baking it, you just like throw it in with all the toppings on, one of 2 things happens. You either end up with a perfectly toasted crust and a scarred and scorched and burnt to a crispy crunch top, which is not ideal, or you end up with a perfectly cooked top and a doughy, sometimes even gooey crust. So par baking it is essential to make sure that you get a consistent bake throughout your pie. Now, one thing I did with Liam when I was at the grocery store is, we took a look at every single kind of pizza sauce, and we just looked at 2 numbers. We looked at the protein and we look at the calories. Inside of tomato sauce, you're not gonna see a whole lot of variance in protein. It's gonna be 1 or 2 grams, per, this one's half a cup, that's pretty much the standard serving size. You're not gonna see a whole lot of variety there, so protein's not that important. You're not looking for like a crazy high protein tomato sauce. But you are gonna look at the calories, because if you're gonna have any sort of food like this, you wanna reduce the amount of calories that you get in total, so you don't go over your daily limit, which will add to fat gain and weight gain over time, right? So I found one here that is 70 calories per half cup. That's a pretty good number. When you go to the grocery store, just look at the nutrition facts and look at the calorie number per half cup. Some of them will be as high as 180, 200 calories. Some of them will be as low as 90 calories, or in this case, 70. So it's always a good rule of thumb to look at those numbers and see what you find.
What's your go-to grocery store that you like to shop at?
Oh man, I always told myself as a kid that if I could like shop at Whole Foods every day without looking at prices, I'd make it. I like Whole Foods quality and stuff. Yeah, my go-to is Ralph's. There's a new one called Lazy Acres that one of my friends put me on that is really good, has a lot of really good baked goods. Can't forget Costco. Costco's great for buying super high volume. And the one thing I'll say about Costco that I love, more so than any other grocery store, they have the best like frozen pre-prepared meals in terms of quality than like anything else. If you go to like Walmart, you get a bag of like frozen chicken tenders or frozen chicken. Yeah, they're gonna be fine, but like for some reason, the Kirkland brand, the Costco variety, really good. All right, let's come back to the pizza. So we talked about the caloric content of this tomato sauce, 70 calories for half a cup. Those are some good numbers, right? That's gonna keep our overall calorie number on the lower side, which contributes to fat loss. Now we're gonna look at our cheese. You have a lot of different options with cheese on pizza. The best one, in my opinion, that I think a lot of people agree with is mozzarella, but we're using part skim mozzarella, which in general is gonna produce better macros. So look at this, you have for a quarter cup, you have 80 calories, 7 grams of protein. That's an amazing ratio. That's almost like a 10% ratio between protein and calories. That's a great number. For reference, if you're gonna have like a protein shake, you're gonna get like a 20% ratio or a 25% ratio. So for instance, you'll have 160 calories, 32 grams of protein, right? That's a solid ratio. To get close to a 10 in cheese is great. That's like about as good as certain like steaks, like ribeye or something. All right, so we're gonna take our part skim mozzarella and we can be pretty generous with it because the macros on this cheese are great. We don't have to worry about being really, really careful. When you're making a food that has bad macros, that aren't great, that are super high in calorie, yeah, you need to be a little bit more judicious in how much you use. But mozzarella cheese is a nice exception. We have a lot of bandwidth to use as much as we need. Typically, I think it's like 1.5 cups is the standard amount of cheese that you'll throw on a pie like this. We're just gonna spread it all around, make sure we cover all the edges. All right, one more ingredient, turkey pepperoni. Turkey pepperoni tastes nearly identical to regular pepperoni, just like part skim mozzarella. You're barely gonna notice a difference when you actually put it on a pizza and eat it. But turkey pepperoni has less fat, so it also has less calories than standard pepperoni and has a good amount of protein as well. Now the exact number of slices, I think in my last pie I put like 17 on, but just fill it up as you like. I like a good amount of pepperoni on mine, so I'm gonna be generous. Again, just so you understand the macros on this thing. For every 16 slices, you have 70 calories and 10 grams of protein. That's an even better ratio than 10%. That's awesome, 7 grams of protein would be a 10% ratio, so you're doing even better than that. In general, I find foods that have a 10% ratio of protein to calories are pretty ideal. Like, it's hard to overeat on them. You'll hit your protein goal a lot faster and you're unlikely to go over your calorie goal. For the simple reason that foods that are much higher in protein are really satiating. They tend to be really nutrient dense. So there's this little indirect benefit of eating foods that are higher protein that makes you feel fuller on fewer calories. Even if that's not your original intention, even if you just aimed for the protein, you're gonna end up with foods that are better for your diet all around. And that's one of the reasons why protein will be something that I'm always talking about, emphasizing, and trying to get more of in people's diets. Here's the pie in all its glory. We're gonna throw this back in for 15 minutes and we'll be done. Pizza's done. Let's grab it out and see how it looks. That's nice. All right, our next step is to transfer this to something that we can cut it in. Much as I would like to just slice into this while it's in the pan, it's harder to do that. I don't want to risk scratching the bottom. I already see there's a nice crust on the bottom here. That is a beaut. That is lovely to see, and it looks incredible. All right, Liam, here's the slice.
Let's see how this compares.
The moment of truth.
Looking good. So good.
It's hidden.
Oh my God.
So that's it. You can make a pizza at home. This one has over 90 grams of protein on minimal calories compared to where you'd get one from Pizza Hut or any other kind of chain. And we made it at home with 5 ingredients. Super simple.